Friends, today I will introduce the topic of population policies. First lecture is about population policies in general, and in the second lecture, then after this we will talk about population policies in India. Now, the first question referring to population policy would be, what is a policy? Now, according to John Weeks, his book Population Policy is a formalized set of procedures designed to guide behavior. The purpose is either to maintain consistency in behavior or to alter behavior in order to achieve a specified goal. Population policy represents a strategy for achieving a particular pattern of population change. In this context, population policies may be referred to as government views and policies with respect to population size and growth, population age structure, fertility, reproductive health and family planning, health and mortality, spatial distribution of population and internal and international migration within the context of demographic, social and economic change. Now, the major issues facing developed countries with regard to population on which policies are focused are three. One is aging, second is low or below replacement fertility, and third immigration. The rate of immigration is around 3 per 1000 population, which is quite high, and all these points are interrelated, because low or below replacement level fertility persistent over decades and centuries is bound to produce the phenomenon of aging, and it is a kind of irreversible process. So, aging becomes a problem, number of inactive people 65 plus, 80 plus, 85 plus, those dependent on pension, those in hospice, their number starts increasing. In developing countries can be called to be in the second or third stage of demographic transition, moderate fertility rates which need to be brought down further characterize them. Then there are reproductive health issues related to high or moderate infant mortality, HIV AIDS, especially in the context of sub-Saharan Africa. There are some sub-Saharan African countries where incidence of HIV AIDS is quite high, almost as high as 20% of the couples in reproductive ages. As far as international migration is concerned, it is not so much a problem. There is net emigration, and that is 1 per 1000. Accordingly, developed countries are more concerned with immigration and raising birth rate through various incentives to women. Developing countries focus more on expanding health infrastructure, increasing marriage age, launching effective family planning programs, communication and health, and HIV and AIDS wherever incidence of HIV is high, and in other countries for preventive purposes. No task is easy, neither to control fertility nor to raise it. Perhaps raising birth rate, as in European countries, has been found to be more difficult because it results from irreversible processes like women education and empowerment. The next issue regarding population policies is of availability of data. For building a policy framework and taking action, there is a need for data to know what are the current rates of fertility, infant mortality, maternal mortality, what are the measures of health, and these data are also indicative of the areas of concern, because the areas of concern vary from country to country. So, there are data needs of different kinds for different countries. Sources of data on policies. You may like to know more about population policies, and you can go to un.org and see the database on population policies. I have taken this quote from there. The World Population Policies database, last updated in 2015, provides comprehensive and up to date information on the population policy situation and trends for all member states and non-member states of the United Nations. UN Policy Section database provides information on government views and policies on 7 major topics. These 7 topics are: 1. Population size and growth. Growth means growth rate, concern about growth of population. Second, population age structure. Countries are worried about age structure also, because age structure defines the problem of aging. Neither too young an age structure nor too old an age structure are required for economic progress or development. Third is fertility, which means birth rate, total fertility rate and other measures of fertility, mostly total fertility rate. Then reproductive health and family planning, couple protection rate, nutrition among women, and service facilities, and many other things may be of interest to different countries. Health, overall health, and spatial distribution. There are some large countries like India, and we are interested in regional or state wise distribution of population and internal migration and also international migration. So, these are 7 topics, 7 themes on which UN policy section collects data from member and non-member countries. To repeat: population size and growth, population age structure, fertility, reproductive health and family planning, health, spatial distribution and internal migration, and international migration. Now, this is the picture that emerges from database of the United Nations. For example, these crosses show that these kinds of data are available or these data are of concern to respective government. For example, and this is given year wise: 1976, 86, 96, 2001, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. If you look at 15 picture, which is the latest picture, then there are data on and there are concerns about policy on growth. There are concerns about level level of concern about aging of the population. Most countries are concerned about aging of population, and they are also concerned about measures adopted to address population aging. Similarly, in case of fertility, the 3 most important points are views on fertility, the 3 most important points are policy on fertility level, measures on birth registration coverage, and third, measures on family and work balance. In case of reproductive health and family planning, the concerns are government support for family planning, policy on restricting access to contraceptive services, measures on reproductive and sexual health of adolescents, legal grounds on which abortion is permitted, and level of concern about unsafe abortions. In case of health and mortality, the variable of concern is measures to address newborn and maternal mortality, but these concerns have been changing. Similarly, there is concern about in spatial distribution and internal migration, there is concern about this policies on the spatial distribution of population and policies on rural development, policies on living conditions and sustainability of urban areas. Actually, this rural development, its presence or absence or rate of rural development is a major factor in policies on rural urban composition, because rural urban composition changes due to migrants from rural to urban areas, most of which are pushed from rural areas due to bad economic conditions, unemployment, fragmentation of land, population pressure, and maybe a number of social reasons, institutional reasons, maybe caste conflicts, maybe communal conflicts, or that people want to get rid of these traditional primordial institutions and so on. Regarding international migration, there are concerns about policy on immigration. In 2015, it is immigration, not so much of other thing. Then rationale for current immigration policy. Why do you want immigration policy? Then policy on highly skilled workers. Then measures on integration of migrants, their assimilation and acculturation, and measures on illegal migration, illegal migration, and then also there are views on emigration, on policy to encourage the return of citizens, and finally, measures to attract investment by diaspora. Diaspora means that people belonging to your country may be widespread in other countries, mostly more developed countries. They send remittances and they are encouraged to invest in their own country, so that the native country can develop and reap benefit from the investment by diaspora or those who have gone outside from the country. Like in our country, we call them non-resident Indians. In India, the population policy starts with provision of family planning services and IEC. IEC means information, education and communication. The major turning points are 1976, 1977 and 2000. In 1990s, arresting growth of HIV virus became a major policy issue, and NACO, National AIDS Control Organization, was established to evolve policy framework for mapping, informing and providing services. At the present, it focuses on gender equality and reproductive health approach. There are always some barriers in effective implementation of the population policy, whether in developed countries or in developing countries. First of all, democratization, and people do not like that state applies any kind of force, compulsion or coercion or disincentive for the implementation of population policies. We have seen this during emergency time, how people protested against compulsory sterilization, and it became a sort of political issue, and that was the major reason why in the next parliamentary election the government was or the Congress party was defeated. Then there are cultural factors. Quite often there is a conflict between culture and tradition and the government policies. In those situations, culture is likely to prevail. Like we have a policy regarding age of marriage, but still we find that a large number of marriages are taking place below the legal minimum age of marriage, and there are socio-economic factors, group identities and distrust of state. A few days before, I read in the newspaper that the Jain community in India is uniting. Jains have much below replacement level fertility, and their leaders were telling that Jain couples should produce 4 children. Otherwise, their proportion in the overall population of India is going to decline very fast. Then government may sometimes lack resources such as infrastructure, facilities, money, manpower to implement the population policy. So, what is effective policy? Since to implement population policy, a nation state has to spend resources, it is legitimate to ask whether policy is effective. Is it worth to spend money on population policy, on anything, on improving the age of marriage or on reproductive health or migration? How does one define the effectiveness of policy? A question arises. It is the policy is the degree to which a policy is able to achieve its desired objectives regarding development, regional equality, long term needs of society and so on. So, like in the new population policy of India, meeting the unmet needs is a policy variable, and therefore, we need data on this, and effectiveness of population policy would mean to what extent unmet need, percentage of couples with unmet needs for family planning is declining. Prerequisites of effective population policy. Population policies have some prerequisites or conditions in which they will be effective or ineffective, or they will succeed or fail. Policy is stated in unambiguous and unequivocal terms. It is not that government wants something and people understand something else from that, and there is a good governance. If government itself is not trusted, then policies are unlikely to succeed. Then strategies should be based on good understanding of the socio-economic and cultural milieus. There is a good political support for the policy, and adequate resources are mobilized to implement the policy. Socio-economic development and the population policy are influencing the targets in the same direction, then policy will be more successful. If socio-economic development is going to raise urbanization level and government wants to decrease level of urbanization, then the policy will be less effective or ineffective. And then finally, civil society is in agreement with the goals of the policy. There are difficulties in assessing effectiveness of population policy. One, evaluation of population policy is problematic. The reason is that one cannot have an experimental method to evaluate the implementation of policy. You rely on surveys and qualitative data. Population trends depend on policy as well as on multitude of other factors such as the institutional context, economic conditions, culture, value of children, religious doctrines, autonomy, etc. For example, how can one separate the effect of family planning program from the effect of modernization and development? Very difficult, though attempts are made, and appropriate statistical techniques as of regression analysis, nested regression, ANOVA, ANCOVA have been used to separate the effects of the program from the effects of modernization and socio-economic development. The major issues in policy making: lack of consensus, lack of adequate measurement, lack of data, conversion of statistics of family planning into reduction in total fertility rate, and lack of clear theoretical understanding of population development nexus and how the effect of policy be separated from the effect of development and modernization, and lack of appreciation for monitoring and evaluation of population programs. Lack of consensus regarding the major goals of the population policy is a serious problem. Therefore, even those governments that now have an officially stated policy have taken decades to arrive at the policy statement and get it approved by appropriate state bodies. In India, after independence, we were concerned about population explosion, but it took us almost 5 decades to develop a policy draft with the approval of the parliament in year 2000. That is why our policy is also called National Population Policy 2000, and there are lack of data, that is another problem. Policy problems of less developed countries in particularly are that these less developed countries are statistically less developed, detailed data are not available, data are incomplete or unreliable, there are technical problems. How does one convert the data on number of users of family planning methods into measures of number of births averted and the percentage impact on birth rate? For evaluation of programs, you need baseline data on age distribution and age specific fertility rates, data on pattern of mortality, reliable data on family planning users by method, age, sex and duration of use, rate of continuation and discontinuation by age. Here by continuation and discontinuation I mean modern methods of family planning, and effectiveness of the different methods included in the program. For evaluation, the evaluators need a clear definition of whether the goal of the stated policy is to reduce population growth rate. So, we need clear statements of goals or fertility rate or mortality rate or all. The goal to be clear, measurable and meaningful. Should the government aim at reducing birth rate or total fertility? These are different issues. Birth rate may not decline even when fertility rate is declining, and India is in that condition. Total fertility rate is declining, but birth rate is not declining to that scale, and that is why we are still growing at almost 1.4% per year, although the total fertility rate of India has declined to 2.2. A clear analysis to identify all factors on which the target indicators depend is also an important and quite complicated exercise. Now, you may ask, are developed countries more effective in implementing population policy? The developed countries, my answer is that the developed countries are worried about low fertility, particularly because it causes aging. It not only raises proportion of the old in the total population of the country, it also causes aging among the aged, increasing proportion of very old, say 80 plus or 85 plus, among the old, say 65 plus. Will the industrially advanced postmodern societies be able to have third demographic transition and improve fertility levels through state intervention or community action? There is no simple answer, because if we go by what Nathan Kiffin says, that fertility has declined due to women education and autonomy and freedom of women. Now, these things cannot be controlled. It appears that with the end of value of children, it is impossible to raise fertility unless new institutional mechanisms are developed, which are virtually coercing women to produce children. Merely giving them more facilities for producing children will not help. This is not helping in developed countries in Europe. Any attempt to predict post-transitional fertility in the developed countries is in vain. It is more difficult to implement population policy effectively in the developed countries than in the developing countries, but possible if society supports family, and some Eastern Asian countries are showing the way. Now, in the future, if you want to improve fertility or you want to maintain fertility at levels above 2.1, the replacement level, then while women are working outside home, their work at home will have to be shared by their husbands or male members. It is the sharing of work both outside and inside the home that is going to protect society from vanishing. Otherwise total fertility is constantly declining. Now, at the end I would like to read a rather long paragraph from MacDonald's advice. The solution to low fertility lies neither in the moral rights call for a rolling back of social liberalism, nor in the old left's agenda of rolling back economic deregulation. Both waves of change have achieved many of the desirable outcomes for which they were intended. Most people prefer to live in a society that offers social freedom and personal choice. Most prefer to work in an environment that rewards enterprise and endeavor, but most people prefer to have long lasting intimate relationships and to have children. The solution therefore lies in a third wave of social change, new and substantial priority to the support of family life, especially the bearing and rearing of children. New perspectives on the family are required that recognize the vital social and personal significance of family life, and that understand that family life would be played out amid the social liberalism and the new capitalism that are integral to 21st century economies and societies. Thank you.